Therapists of Reddit, have you ever been genuinely scared of a patient and why? Person on the other side. Went to my university's psych hospital due to suicidal ideation. Was 18 at the time. I was lobbed in with the under 22 group and there's this fireman in his 20s who I'd learned through the grapevine, other nosy as patients, was bipolar. No biggie. We all got something wrong in there. Right? He was very quiet. Decently attractive and kept to himself even in group sessions. He would always give me this penetrative, unblinking stare all day long. I'm very shy and hadn't spoken 2 words to the guy. Maybe smiled in passing if I made eye contact, which I avoided due to the staring. In the main room, like a living room I guess for a psych ward, we'd all be hanging out and he'd sit across from me with a sketchbook. Honestly just thought he was passing time. Once you're committed you can't leave unless the doctor says so. Anyways, my mom comes to the hospital to visit me and she noticed the guy staring at me. She walks behind him while he's with his sketchbook and her entire body froze. Like completely locked up as if you're watching a video and press pause. He had drawn a very detailed picture of me. She calmly tells the nurse and the guy's removed from the room. Never saw him again. A couple of days later I overheard some nurses saying that the guy had filled the entire sketchbook with different drawings of me, dead, in different scenarios. Honestly, it was scariest thing I've ever been through. Edit, spelling mistake. Someone needs to make a thread about what patients see in psych wards. I could write a book about everything that happened the 8 days I was there. Holy shit, that's terrifying. The only one I have felt a little scared of was one who threatened to kill me. I knew she meant it. She had already assaulted a number of other staff. She got sent to a higher security ward and I heard she had broke staff's fingers first day she was there. She held staff and other patients hostage in one of our rooms, threatening them but circling the table as if playing with them first. I see violence and aggression regularly and it doesn't faze me, but she did. I would purposely avoid eye contact and look straight ahead, avoiding her, and pretend I wasn't intimidated. As that's what she wanted. So do these people catch charges for assaulting hospital staff? How does that all work? I'm an actual therapist. The first in the thread. The only time I've ever been scared is when my physical safety is threatened, such as a patient blocking the door, hinting they know where I live, or implying they'd like to hurt or grape me. I have a stellar poker face and once these really tough patients realize that I'm unfazed they usually drop it. My strength in therapy is mostly just broad acceptance and tolerance of whatever they bring to the table. I let them know when I have to break confidentiality from the get-go, and that's that. I am a new therapist and like you have already experienced the threat of physical safety by hinting they know where I live, my personal number, social media, or commenting on my body. How the hell do you even respond? Silence? Or do you talk about it? Because I have struggled with this and no one really tells you how to deal with it. Obligatory, not a therapist but an EMT. Have one PT that calls us saying he overdosed on meds probably once every 1-2 months. Wears stuff with our logo and pretends to be on our ambulance service. This person used to show up to actual scenes and pretend to be one of our first responders. It took a deputy putting him in cuffs before he stopped. He also has a radio and a pager. Radio only receives, and will record out conversations and send them to me. Strangely enough, he is actually a very nice person, and if you talk to him without mentioning the ambulance you would never know he has issues. Doesn't scare me but scares some of our more experienced crew members, so I'm guessing they know something I don't. This was early on in training, but a mandated client had dropped acid before the session and it started coming on while we were talking. He didn't want to be there as it was and was much larger than me, 5 feet 0 inches. Once he got to threatening me for being the reason everything was wrong with the world, I ended up needing to get up and leave my own office to get a supervisor. I definitely thought he would hit and or strangle me if I stayed. Why on earth would you drop acid before going in public, let alone therapy? When I was in med school, our psychiatry attending told that years ago she dyed her hair red. Patient was thinking about killing redhead women and then putting their plucked head into boxes. So she had 2 weeks off and patient was carried by another doc. I was pretty nervous when the drunk partner of a client backed me into a corner. And pretty goddamn sweaty when a violent sex offender with a good 80 pounds on me blocked my exit and told me he was going to kill me and my family. The one that really got me long term was a 15-year-old girl in a residential program I worked at. She had substance use issues, which is why she was there. But it was clear from the jump that she had deep mental health stuff stemming from her child. She had been adopted out of a Russian orphanage where she and a younger sibling has been left in a crib alone for God knows how long. Covered in lice and shaved bald. She had a lot of expected attachment issues, but talking to her was like talking to a black pit full of hatred. She hated everyone and everything and had no conception of consequences or what self-preservation was. She'd do stuff that would spin your head around in terms of how unsafe it was, and she just had no reaction. There was no getting through to her, as she needed the interventions when she was a very small child to be able to move forward successfully. She was discharged when it was found out that she was hiding knives under her mattress. I would not be surprised if she was in jail at this point. My parents foster children and had one girl like this, though could hide it. She acted sweet as molasses but turned into Satan. Pulled a plastic bag over my head while I was driving on an interstate. Told my dad she would dance on his grave one day. Dad caught her one night with a steak knife in her bed. The disturbing part was that she was inching the point closer and closer to her own eyeball. When asked what the hell she was doing, she replied she was curious what stabbing her eyeball would feel like. Kid creeped me the hell out. She was in therapy, of course. But I really doubt she is normal now. Just hope she hasn't hurt herself or someone else. Worked with a patient that complained of reoccurring night terrors about lobsters being boiled alive. He couldn't figure out what was causing them. The fact he held his GF, chopped her up and boiled her head didn't seem come to him as a reason he might be having these dreams. My only fear is the system will have to release him one day, as they could never get him sane enough to stand trial. At what point do you stop waiting for the client to connect the dots and just say something like that? Yes. Enough to quit my job. Had high caseload of suicidal teens. Most were medicated and low risk. But had 2 kiddos who had several suicide attempts prior to me. And while under my watch, I was getting physically ill. Not sleeping well. Constantly worried. I tried to transfer them to a higher level of care, but our company was greedy and didn't want to transfer them and lose those funds. I ended up quitting on the spot for these kids to be given a trauma-focused therapist and get the help they needed. Best decision for both myself and those kids. Thank you for doing what was right and not caving to the system. I'm sorry you were put in that position. Wishing you well. My uncle is one. And the answer is yes. Therapists aren't like they show in movies where they only deal with insanely complex and tough issues. Most of the people that come see him just have normal problems that most people can relate to. People seek therapy for a whole assortment of issues. So if someone goes to him with violent thoughts, or deeply disturbing issues and ideologies, it shocks him like it would shock the rest of us. They are just trained to handle it better than the rest of us. But deep down their reaction to it is the same. You see, it's this sort of thing that makes me not want to go to therapy. I don't think anyone could truly understand what it's like to think the things I do. Not a therapist but a school counselor, small young female. I have a student who is 6 feet 4 inches with emotional behavioral issues. Reading his social history made me cry because of all the shit he's been through. So, of course, I have a soft spot for him. But his anger gets out of control and it can be very scary. He punched a pole right in front of me once and narrowly missed my face. I looked at him in the eyes and sternly said, "Do you realize you almost just punched me in the face?" He snapped out of his rage and apologized profusely. I wanted to hug him and tell him everything was going to be alright. Edit. I messed up the last sentence and rewrote it. If you haven't had LSCI training, you should look into it. I think it might be right up your alley and a useful tool in your tool belt. Isn't it awesome? Source: I'm an EBD teacher. And the training was, non-ironically, life-changing. Used to be a therapist at a behavioral health hospital. I had some patients who genuinely scared me in theory, but nothing ever happened with them. I was significantly attacked twice at work. Both patients were young women. Neither of them scared me beforehand. Both were incredibly quiet, withdrawn, and unassuming. One strangled me with my keys. My lanyard was a breakaway for that very reason. But she had tried to steal them several times that shift in attempt to escape the building and run into traffic. So I stupidly knotted off the breakaway portion. We carried panic buttons on the lanyards and I was able to press it while being strangled with it. The other attack occurred when I was fairly new and on a low security unit. In view of other staff. I was walking away from the patient and she grabbed me by my hair, pulled me to the ground, and dragged me for several feet down the hallway where she began kicking me in the chest and stomach. She was sent to a higher security unit as a result. I guess I was afraid of her after that. But she wasn't there long. There was law enforcement intervention after she assaulted a pregnant nurse, pulled her to the ground as well, and stomped on her stomach. OMG, what happened to the nurse's kid? In my first semester as a practicum therapist, I had a gentleman client bring a large hunting knife to session one day. He had it in his waistband in the bag. He revealed it halfway through our session. He had been referred to our practice for anger issues. Another client, this enormous dude, confessed to punching a sleeping infant in the face and head repeatedly because he had become jealous of it. Then one day he comes into session. He seems more calm than usual. And as we discuss a previous week's session, he tells me about how much he hates his wife. And he had incidentally bought a gun to go deer hunting. We are in SoCal. That was the last session we had before he stopped coming. I still think about that guy a lot. I hope that babe is okay. When in doubt, report. I feel like if an enormous dude punched a sleeping infant in the face and head repeatedly, it's most definitely not okay. Probably dead or has brain damage. Genuinely scared? For myself? No. But I work on an inpatient unit and there are always people around. We have had violent patients before and I have been stressed by incidents. But never have I said, damn, this person is dangerous. But it's easy to feel safe when you trust your co-workers. I have genuinely felt scared for my patients. However, that despite our beat efforts they will heal themselves. Usually it's addicts. Addiction heals 100% of the time if the user keeps using. There are also depressed patients who you know are probably still suicidal, but adamantly deny it. There is only so long we can keep someone, and you cannot effectively treat someone who refuses to be treated. They will yes you to death and leave your office and do it anyways. Bipolar patients can be the toughest on this, because they often love their manic highs and can't stand being at what the rest of the world would call a normal level. Who wants to feel normal when you can feel amazing? Never mind everything else that comes with mania. Psychotic patients aren't very scary. People get scared at the idea, but you just have to remember that it's their truth in the moment. Violence and psychosis is very rare. Most of the violent psychotics I have seen have been inwardly violent. As in, willing to hurt themselves even if they feel threatened by an outward force. Addicts are usually the only patients you have to worry about flipping out. It's almost always because they are withdrawing and want to leave to get high. It's less common but does happen that they will flip out to get medicated on the unit. Or to be threatening or menacing. Like I said earlier, doesn't actually scare me. There have been patients who disturbed me, but that's another question. Bipolar patients often love their manic highs and can't stand being at what the rest of the world would call a normal level. You hit the nail right on the damn head with that one. I was diagnosed with bipolar 1 when I was in my early 20s. And to this day, I have to resist the urge to go off my meds just to feel manic again. Mania is the sweetest drug I've ever had. Until it turns on you. You go from the best high ever to the lowest low. And if you're real and lucky, you're feeling both at the same time. Turns every dial to 11 and leaves it. I also love the fact that you clarified that psychotic patients aren't too scary because I've been there. And it's super ducking hard to deal with the aftermath. And TBH, I've always been ashamed of how I treated the nurses at the facility I was in. And reading that actually helped. I know it's just one opinion. But still.